Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Joe Live. My name is Joe Escobedo, and my special guest today is Priyanka Nadkarni, who
Hello.
is hello. Pri is the managing director of Window Seat Consulting. Thanks so much for being on the show, Priyanka.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's nice to do this.
Absolutely. And now you're calling in from Melbourne, so happy to have you on the show.
Yeah.
What that I think is super relevant right now when everyone is doing their planning for 2021 is, what is that plan? What does that strategy actually look like? And I know you work with a lot of different B2B business leaders, marketers to help plan out that kind of strategy for the year. So I'd love to hear kind of what are some of the common challenges or pitfalls you see companies make when they're putting together their 2021 strategy.
Yeah. Thanks for that. You know what? One of the things which happened last year is everyone, as we all know, had to go really quickly and adapting to everything, basically everything going digital. And for B2B marketers who have at least a portion of their events, things in their marketing activities in physical events and actual in-person activities, that would have been quite a jolt and was quite a jolt for many B2B marketers. So, but I think the challenge has been also as that's happened, any little gaps that you thought you could fix a little bit later down the track in terms of what you're doing from a digital standpoint and whether or not you're measuring things well, or whether or not the systems are in place for you to be able to execute that's really just come up to a fold. So I think that the one major thing that I keep having a conversation of is around accelerating what they thought that they could have done slowly over the course of a couple of years perhaps, and really taking a good hard look at what needs to happen now, but with the understanding that not everything can happen at once. So it's been a really interesting time to start helping people plan for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of industries, like you said, who are quite traditional, and now they realize that they have to go digital, or they have to accelerate their digital plans and processes. So what are some of the, I guess, common challenges you see for those brands who are not used to making that shift? What are some of the pitfalls that they're making in their acceleration?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a pitfall. I just think a lot of it has to do with where do I start,
Okay.
and so a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is around helping people identify what those big problems are. So having to almost workshop and take it back to some really basic questions. We use things like the 5 whys to really understand across your entire marketing funnel. So if you were to look at the marketing funnel being all the way from your awareness down to your conversion, what are the biggest customer challenges that you're not fixing, or you're not addressing at each one of those? And then at a high level, at an operations level, it can be things like training, or are you measuring correctly, or and really understanding where all the gaps are, number one. And then getting those down to some proper decent why is that happening? So I love the 5 whys methodology that allows you to continue to ask the same question. So it's not, why aren't I getting enough leads on my website? You keep asking the question, why is that? Why is that? And it might, well be that it's because you just got your team is so focused on webinars at the moment that you haven't had the time. I mean, it seems basic, but rather than sitting there and understanding, going and making huge investments in that, it's really interesting to be able to get down to the crux of the problem based on what is the customer issue at each stage of your marketing funnel.
Absolutely. For those who aren't familiar with the 5 whys, you touched on it just a minute ago in terms of like asking five times. What does that process actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, for example, it starts with a very easy, question. So you might say, why aren't we getting enough inquiries online for our business? Why? Because we don't have enough traffic on our website or LinkedIn or whatever. So why is that? Because people can't find out, we're not visible. Why is that? We don't post regularly. We don't spend enough money on search engine marketing. Well, why is that? So keeping to ask those questions to actually get down to the crux of why it is that you're not doing that, and that way you're fixing the crux of the problem, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid over it and just putting budget into, ad dollars perhaps. I don't, that's the way we're looking.
No, I think it makes sense in terms of drilling down deeper and really understanding the problem. And I know you, like I said, you mentioned you run similar workshops with organizations. What are some of the teams that you usually involve in these workshops? I mean, marketing, obviously, but who else do you generally try to bring into these sessions?
Yeah, so it's usually just marketing, but I do believe that at parts throughout. So once you've actually done the work, usually one of the last sessions is actually bringing in the business stakeholders. I know, sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's not as if the business stakeholders shouldn't be there, but I think once you've decided, you need to validate from a marketing perspective, you need to validate with your business stakeholders and get some buy-in from your business stakeholders. So I do sort of advocate for making that a collaborative experience, but I also think that from a marketing perspective, figure out what you're wanting to do first. But sales, definitely, because today I don't think that you can run a function of marketing without being incredibly aligned, if not in the same team as your sales team. Technology, extremely important if you are lacking in that department and are looking to integrate some real software to solve these problems, because there's then costs and infrastructure and processes and all of that you really want to be a part of, and then it depends. It can be a product team if you're so set up that way, but I do think the initial one usually is as a marketing function, the assumption is you actually know the business very well to start with, and then go, and you might need to go out and get further information. But the first one being the core marketing team, yeah.
Okay. I mean, the reason I ask is because I can see, in my previous roles, the CEO would always ask, why aren't our leads, we're getting so many leads, why aren't they converting? So the sales team would say, marketing is giving us poor leads, or the marketing was telling sales, you can't close these leads. We're getting some great leads. So if you ask them kind of the why, sometimes, it's very easy to point the finger and say, okay, sales is not closing these leads, or marketing is not giving us great leads. So I think asking those questions hopefully drills down and understands where's the actual issue, rather than pointing fingers and blaming each other.
Absolutely. And as I say, completely advocate for having that really close sales connection if you don't already have it. Because I always talk about it being a handball. Marketing can't handball. I don't know. I grew up with AFL, so I know what a handball is, but I don't know whether anyone else knows what a handball is. But just to sort of to take that lead and throw it over and just hope it gets hope A, you've actually met what the salesperson needed, and B, that once that salesperson gets it, whether you support them through that process to actually close that lead or deal, certainly it's necessary to have that very close alignment. But I don't know, maybe it's just because I've been a marketer through and through that I kind of understand that you need to have a really strong understanding yourself before you then go out and validate. You absolutely have to validate it with numerous parts of the business, but to have a good understanding of it yourself, because I've been in positions before where you go into meetings and sales drives the conversation and sales drives the message. And I think if you're a modern marketer today, you can be a part of that conversation rather than have it driven by sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they should be working in conjunction. I think that's the only way you can actually drive sales, is if both are really on the same page and are going after the same demographics, the same audiences, similar strategy, and so on. So I think that makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned in terms of technology, when should your technology partners get involved in this process? Is it after you validate with the marketing team, or should be during the exploration phase when you're looking at all the different, you're evaluating your mark stack, what's working, what's not working? When should they get involved in this process?
That's a really good question. And I think that really differs if you are in terms of what scope you're looking to do. I think there are a number of B2B organizations that are working with legacy systems and products that they need really strong integration into a existing IT system. And in that case, that process needs to come forward. that process also might need to come forward from a procurement team if you're large enough, because a lot of companies will say, well, you can't go and find a marketing technology solution or MarTech solution without the involvement of a procurement team, for example. But I do think that that if you take it back to my first point of actually understanding what the problem is, sometimes technology isn't the problem.
Yeah.
So understanding where the gaps are first, and then understanding what dependencies that technology that you're looking to find has with your existing systems. That's probably where you bring, in my opinion, you bring IT into the fold, because you can have the world's best marketing technology. If you don't know how to use it and it doesn't integrate into your existing systems, it will just make your job more painful. And a lot of the times I'm having conversations with people and it's like, you know what, maybe Excel, just stick to Excel, because you're not going to be able to integrate this into your existing system, and you're just going to be doubling the work. And we well, we want to move on. We will want to move on from Excel someday, but sometimes that's where we land.
No, absolutely. I mean, we work with a lot of tech companies, so I obviously don't want to offend them. But I think, to your point, that there are many brands think of technology as like a silver bullet. So if I get this product, then it's going to solve all our CRM or all our automation issues. But to your point, that they may be solving the wrong issue, or they may be selecting the wrong product for the wrong kind of challenge they're trying to address. So I think, to your point, really understanding the problem first. Otherwise, none of this really makes any sense going forward.
And to be honest, sometimes it's not actually the technology's not speaking together. The person, like the people processes, aren't in place to be able to have those, or perhaps it's a legal or compliance issue that means that you can't actually take data from one system to another. So it's not always the tech's, the tech problem that's the case. I mean, but it is nice. I think just last week we did a really simple LinkedIn connection into HubSpot with one of my clients, and he screenshotted it to me, and I was like, isn't just so nice when technology just works the way that you want it to work? Because that is unfortunately sometimes a rare occasion.
Yes. And I think that's the challenge with, technology in general, is, like you said, getting that to talk to each other. I mean, two different challenges you talked about. One is getting the teams internally to talk to each other, and then secondly is getting the technology to talk to each other. Because in my previous roles, what we faced is like gaps in terms of reporting. So we'd figure out top of the funnel where their leads were coming through, and then on the sales CRM side, there would be a gap. So we wouldn't actually be sure where they actually connected and where they fell through. So I think that's a common issue, and I don't think there's really a way to fix that in general. I think it's just something that we need to be aware of and understand that does happen. It doesn't always work seamlessly 100% of the time, but glad to hear that did work in your example with HubSpot.
Had a little chuckle, actually. It was quite funny. But you know what I think it's gonna be? We're gonna get some really smart data analytics marketers coming up the ranks from that are going to be able to help with that challenge in our, I guess what I say, next generation of marketers. That's what I'm hoping for. Next time, I'm going to just hire a bunch of really smart marketing data analysts.
Nice, yeah. No, interesting you bring that point, because I know I'm teaching for ESSEC Business School, and one of the questions they're always asking is, what role should I be focusing on? I know this is a tough one. I don't have any answers in terms of what I should be focusing on, but you would recommend, or you'd like to see more young marketers kind of pursuing data analytics and becoming more familiar with that as they progress in their career.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about every sort of marketing, so even if you are, there's plenty of people that are on either side of the argument about whether or not you're a lead gen performance marketing focus or a brand marketing focus. Either of those need to have the customer insight to be able to do effective marketing programs for that. So you don't run a brand program unless you really understand what the brand behaviors are, the needs and the wants of the customer. How do how is that stacking up against what else is in the market? All that's information. And I think that whilst when I went through my undergrad, there was a little bit of it. In my postgrad, there was a little bit more in terms of marketing, like in terms of data analytics, but it certainly wasn't detailed from a marketing perspective and a consumer behavior and a buying behavior perspective. So if you can focus your attentions on that, I think you'll have a job for life, or at least job for a couple of decades.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because that was one of the things I was talking about in the last class, is really, really understanding your audience. All the other stuff actually becomes much easier. The strategy, the technology, the channels, once you clearly understand your audience. Once again, most brands, I think, really, really struggle with that, which is why you see kind of their marketing and messaging all over the place. So once again, I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of what are some of the ways that you or some of your clients are better understanding the customer and really getting in their shoes.
I must admit, I think the investment in research over the last couple of years has really dropped off, because people are sort of getting to understand. I don't think it's right. I think digital data, using that as the only data that you get to understand your customers is I would like to hope that many brands continue to go back and invest in some real research programs, if not once a year, every couple of years, to understand and have those qualitative conversations with clients and understand where they can be changing the game for their own businesses. But I don't know. I don't know whether it's me, but I've seen that really drop off a cliff a little bit in the last couple of years.
Okay.
I'd like to see big research programs come back in, not for the sake of having big research programs, is just because it's getting someone's data from a digital platform is very different to sitting them in a room and asking them about their experiences.
No, I think that's a good kind of point you bring up, and I think it's a challenge for some of the market research companies. We've consulted for some of them previously, and I think as more brands, as more marketers have more access to more digital data, then they kind of use that as kind of a replacement, or like the holy grail when it comes to their strategy. But to your point, you're saying you should marry that with the traditional research styles of doing surveys, polling, speaking, interviewing different stakeholders or potential target audiences to better understand that side, as well as combining that with the digital portion.
Yeah, absolutely, and perhaps that's getting done at the headquarter level, and I'm just not seeing that so much from a regional perspective with some of the conversations that I'm having. But yeah, it does. I would like to see a little bit more of that, just so that we don't forget that people are people and not sitting behind a laptop.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one example in my previous company when I was doing some tech consulting. Is an oil energy company was focusing on change in brand sentiment. Now, it's obviously something you can kind of touch on with social listening and tools like that, but it's difficult to get it from a broader point of view, particularly where a lot of their consumers are not super active online, or maybe in more emerging markets. So they use that as a way to understand the brand sentiment, as well as to get sentiment not only in the brand, but also in terms of like the messaging. So they had different experiments they were running in different markets to understand, okay, which one performed better? Was it the local story? Was it like the sustainability angle? Which it was the this other angle? So they use that as a way to better understand which performed, not only in terms of the data side and conversions, but also in terms of perception and the sentiment behind that particular campaign and initiative. So I thought that was quite interesting to be part of, or at least see it.
Yeah, I love being a part of that. I've had a couple of experiences throughout my career to actually sit on the other side of a they've got these like rooms where you can watch the study going on. I'm not a market researcher, obviously, but I've been privileged to be on the client side of that a number of times, and they're always really fun to watch.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've seen the rooms, and I've never been on that side. It sounds like
exactly. But yeah, no, it's quite interesting.
I was gonna say, what are some of the other kind of going back to the identifying some of the challenges you talked about? The 5 whys, and then looking at people, processes, and technology. What are some of the other kind of frameworks? I don't want to give away all your secrets, but is there any other frameworks that you've used that have helped identify some of these challenges or gaps or opportunities within a marketing strategy?
I love that you say that my secrets. I'm like, it's not. I always walk around saying, marketing's unfortunately not brain surgery, but it does take some skill to be able to marry up the consumer behavior with the marketing programs that you do. So I'm not giving away secrets, but I do think that once you've identified those challenges, the next challenge for most teams is about where you prioritize. And then it's a people, process, technology conversation, and how long is it going to take us to do that? What's the effort levels? And it's almost like you're road mapping it for your team to be able to sit there and say, okay, well, getting a CRM program into place is if we do a quick and dirty version, it'll take us 3 months. If we want to do it right, it's going to take us a year, because it's going to need all of our sales team to be trained in it. How do we do that? Who else is going to need to be a part of that program? Is IT, for example, or is it so there's those sort of conversations that I think is really useful for a team to be a part of, so that everyone's on the same page in terms of what's the priority for the next 3 months, 1 year, 3 years. And I see a lot of times big programs that take a year or two to complete and just keep rolling. And where we're quite fast paced right now, and people are expecting to see results within 6 months, that can be a major challenge to people. So I always encourage looking at a long-term view, but also looking at what you can achieve in the short term. What's the low-hanging fruit? How can you put that stopgap in place, but don't put a lot of it. I don't like band-aiding situations, but you do need to figure out how to actually find a interim solution if something's going to take you 2 years to deliver. And I'm a very big advocate for doing that sort of execution work.
I think speaking of the low-hanging fruit, one thing that my colleague did previously is, when you do workshops, people get very excited. They throw out a lot of ideas. But what I think she did very well is having like a X and Y matrix. I'm going to try to draw with my hand. And on one side, it would have, going back to what you're saying, is the impact involved, and the other was the effort. So plotting down all the initiatives or all the ideas there, and then they could see which ones they wanted to prioritize, which were the low-hanging fruit based on the impact and effort involved. So I think that was a good way to kind of visualize it, because otherwise people get so excited. They want to say, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And it goes back to your point about kind of obviously knowing what's actually feasible, managing expectations, because it's one thing to go to a workshop and get very excited and say, let's do this, let's change the world. But if there's, it's not all feasible, or you need kind of different resources involved, that was a nice way, I thought, visually to map it out. So it's very clear in terms of what the team is actually focusing on.
Yeah. Frameworks like that certainly work. I'd put another lens on that and also look at timeline. So effort, timeline, and the feasibility. Is it? Have I got it wrong?
Impact. I think she called it impact effort. Yeah, but yes, impact, effort, and timeline should be like ticking all 3 boxes.
Yeah, just to make sure you manage that time expectation, because some things are very quickly implemented, others will take you time, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And looking at the 1 year strategy in general, I mean, it makes sense to break it up into smaller bite-sized things, because to your point, you will have things that can be accomplished in 1 month, in 1 quarter, in half a year, and 1 year. And I think having like a clear timeline in terms of what those initiatives are, you can see all the things that can get completed within that month versus everything that's going to actually take us a year to put into action. So I think, yes, timelines are extremely important, and really breaking it down, because I think people get overwhelmed when they talk about strategy. They think they have to change the world overnight, when if you break it down into smaller pieces, it's much more easy for the team to actually understand and execute upon it.
Yeah, well, that's usually the last part of these conversations. I like to say to get people who will own the project, get a business owner, so someone in the business who is I guess sponsoring that piece of work for you, and really understanding the milestones of what do we need to do and all need to come back to, and effectively just get project streams going for certain things. It also means that you're not going into a workshop, coming up with all these great ideas, and you walk away, and because one person was in charge of documenting and putting it together, it's done again. So really, divvying that up against team responsibilities and saying, okay, you are the project owner for this stream. Let's here's who will support you and go on. I think is a really, really, really useful exercise for team members.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just another example from a previous role is one thing that my former boss had the client do was, for lack of better words, put your money where your mouth is. So having them commit a certain pot of money based on the ideas. So the winning idea got, I don't know, whatever amount they tied to it. So that was, once again, the team implementing it, but also the budget. Sometimes you can do some of these things for very low budget. Sometimes it requires a larger budget if you're implementing, for example, technology, or you need a new employee to execute on it. So that was already settled. They said, okay, it's already, blocked out with the finance and procurement team. The winning idea will get this, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a nice way to kind of actually see it in action, not just have like a nice to do or a nice to have kind of on a long checklist.
Yeah, and certainly when you run these things, you can have fun with them. You can do a Shark Tank version. You can do a hackathon version. There's plenty of ways you can make this much more interactive and fun for the team. But it really comes down to how much time you have and the how big your team is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Priyanka, thank you so much for sharing all your insights and experiences with us. Super appreciative. I think I learned some new ideas and frameworks in terms of I'm going to start implementing the 5 whys with my clients in my kind of my business. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
No problem. It's been lovely to speak to you, and always nice to chat to you. But it's great to speak to you from Melbourne, where we're in a bit of another 5-day lockdown, which ends tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, glad we were able to catch up. Like I said, stay safe. Everyone watching and listening, stay safe. Take care. And we'll see you next Thursday, 12 p.m. SGT. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.